Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts was said to be perhaps one of the most successful pirates ever known. Through his career, he was said to have plundered over 400 ships. He was born in Wales in 1682, under the name John Roberts. Therefore, it comes as a mystery as to why he was so famously known as Bartholomew, though it's speculated that this was an alias inspired from the infamous buccaneer Bartholomew Sharp. It's said that Roberts went to sea at the very young age of 13, but there would be no official mention of him until 1718, when he was a part of a sloop known as the Barbados. In 1719, Roberts would become part of a slave ship known as the Princess, captained by Abraham Plum, where he would be known as the ship's second mate. The Princess would one day anchor at the Gold Coast of Africa, now modern-day Ghana, where they were apprehended by pirates led by Captain Howell Davis. Howell Davis was another Welsh pirate, who came to realise that he quite liked the look of the Princess and its crew, so he forced them all to join him. Davis would recognise Roberts' navigation skills early on, and would come to befriend him quite closely. It's understood that Roberts would become an entrusted crewmate, one that Davis would speak Welsh to, relaying private and confidential information that the rest of the crew were not able to interpret. It wouldn't be long before the life of a pirate grew on Roberts, and while he was hesitant at first to succumb to such a life, he could not deny the advantages of plunder. Weeks after Roberts' capture, Davis would lead a ship to the island of Principe on the western coast of Africa. They would anchor here under the pretense that they were part of the British Navy, allowing them to enter the port safely. Davis had a plan to capture the governor of the island, with the intention of ransoming him back for a hefty price. However, the Portuguese authorities who occupied the island soon learned that they were pirates. A brawl broke loose, and Davis was shot dead. Roberts and the crew were able to escape, but with their captain dead, they had no direction for which to take. The crew was said to be divided up into those with a higher social status and those who were of a lower standing. They were known simply as lords and commoners, and it was the lords of the crew who got to elect a new captain. As you might have guessed, Roberts would be elected as captain, but this was a rather peculiar decision, because Roberts was known to have originally objected to serving as a pirate. However, Roberts' navigational skills were taken into consideration, as well as his strong personality, which is remembered as being outspoken and tremendously opinionated. Roberts' first action as captain was to avenge his former friend and captain, Howell Davis. He and the crew would sail back to Principe in the thick of night, where they would kill a large chunk of the male population. In this gruesome excursion, Roberts and his men would steal everything they could get their hands on before sailing away, leaving the bloodbath behind them. The crew would adorn Roberts as a strong captain, and the events at Principe would solidify their loyalty to him. In fact, his valour in the battle was so noteworthy that the crew would label him as bulletproof and immune to pistol fire. In the year between 1719 and 1720, Roberts and the crew encountered 42 Portuguese ships, which were waiting for a military escort to grant them safe passage to Lisbon. Unfortunately for them, no such military force would be on the way before Roberts and his men could intercede. Roberts would hijack a ship known as Sagrada Familia, which contained 40,000 pieces of Portuguese gold and a haul of jewellery that had been designed for the King of Portugal. Needless to say, the attack on the Portuguese fleet was a massive success, perhaps more of a success than most pirates saw in their lifetimes. In the following weeks, Roberts would set sail for the river Suriname, where they would sell the loot. During this time, Roberts would spot a brigantine and would set sail with a sloop and 40 men. He would entrust the flagship the Rover to a pirate of the crew named Walter Kennedy, and would spend 8 days in pursuit of the brigantine after weather turned against him. Upon returning to the Rover, Roberts learned that Walter Kennedy had stolen the ship and set sail with what was left of the loot. Such is the way of the pirate life, I suppose. Roberts couldn't even be mad, for how could he accuse Kennedy of thievery, having stolen the loot himself? Instead, he established a pirate code and made the remainder of his crew swear on the Bible that they would live up to it. The code consisted of 11 rules, as recorded by Captain Charles Johnson, author of the 1724 book A General History of Pirates. Rule number 1, every man had the right to vote in affairs of the moment, meaning that any man, whether a lord or commoner, could express their opinion on circumstances. Every man also had the right to freshly acquired provisions, including strong liquors, unless the item in which they sought after was low in stock. Rule number 2, any shipmate caught stealing even $1 from the loot would be marooned. If a shipmate robbed another of the crew, he would have his ears and nose slit and would be deserted not on an inhabited island, but instead somewhere more populated where they were sure to encounter difficulties. Rule number 3, no gambling. Rule number 4, a curfew would be instated at 8 PM and all candles and lights would be put out. Any of the crew who weren't finished drinking would have to do so on the deck. Rule number 5, pistols and cutlasses were to be kept clean and ready for battle. Rule number 6, no women were allowed on the ship. If crewmates were found to have brought women on board, the offender would suffer death. Rule number 7, deserting the ship or the quarters in battle would meet with death or marooning. Rule number 8, quarrels between shipmates would not be had on deck, but instead on shore. Arguments were settled by drawing pistols and firing at the other at the quartermaster's signal. Should both pirates miss their shot, their cutlasses should be drawn and they would fight another until the first strike of blood, signalling the winner. Rule number 9, any man on board who lost a limb would receive 8% of pieces of 8. Lesser wounds would allow the wounded to claim a proportionate amount. Rule number 10, the captain and the quartermaster were to receive 2 shares of a prize, while the master, boatswain and gunner were to share 1 share and a half. All other officers would receive 1 1/4. And finally, rule number 11, the musicians of the boat would have to rest on the day of Sabbath. In February 1720, Roberts would suffer a loss from the people of Barbados and Martinique, who appointed pirate hunters to apprehend him. Roberts was forced to flee from the attack and made his way to Dominica to repair his ships and his sloop. 20 of his crew would die from the battle, and this would cause Roberts to develop a vendetta against Barbados and Martinique. He would go on to have his flag redesigned to represent himself standing atop 2 skulls, one labelled ABH, standing for a Barbadian's head, and one labelled AMH, standing for a Martinique's head. Roberts would go on to attack a harbour in Trepassy. In the harbour he discovered 22 merchant boats and 150 fishing ships which had been abandoned by their captains for fear of pirates. Roberts was known to be angered by cowardice, and so the behaviour of the captains boiled his blood. It would lead him to take over one of the brigs to replace the sloop the Fortune, and was fitted with 16 guns. Roberts would go on to capture several French ships, one in which he outfitted with 26 cannons and changed its name to the Good Fortune. It would later be renamed as the Royal Fortune, the name in which Roberts would name several other of his ships. The Royal Fortune would be the beginning of a string of very successful captures for Roberts. He would go on to capture 15 English and French vessels to add to his collection, and a 52-gun French warship, which happened to be carrying none other than the Governor of Martinique. What a treat he was in for. Historians dispute as to whether this event actually happened, but Captain Charles Johnson states in his book A General History of Pirates that Roberts captured the governor promptly and hung him without hesitation. This immense French warship became the new Royal Fortune. In 1721, Roberts had brought sea trade in the West Indies to a standstill. Essentially, no one could get a boat out on the water, not without Roberts popping up and seizing it for himself. This would cause Roberts to set sail for West Africa in hopes of better opportunities for plunder. Roberts would arrive at Cape Verde Islands and would acquire several more ships after the Royal Fortune was said to be leaking. Roberts would go on to capture 2 large ships at the River Crest, Liberia. One of these ships was said to be a frigate known as Onslow, which was transporting soldiers to Cape Coast Castle. A number of these soldiers wanted to join the pirates, but having no sailing experience, Roberts would not pay them the full amount of a regular salary, but instead just a quarter of what a regular pirate earned. The Onslow would become the 4th incarnation of the Royal Fortune. In January 1722, Roberts would set sail into Ouida Harbour with bad intentions. While in this harbour, Roberts encountered 11 ships, 10 of which surrendered to him immediately and were ransomed back to their owners. The 11th ship refused to surrender, and it had angered Roberts so much so that he ordered it burned just to scorn the owner. It's understood that this ship was a slave ship and contained 80 slaves who were likely bound to the burning vessel. Those who were able to escape were likely drowned or were feasted on by sharks. Roberts' cold-hearted side really shines through in moments like these, for when asked by a crewmate whether the slaves should be unshackled, Roberts reportedly told him not to bother as it was a waste of time and efforts. In February 1722, Captain Shalona Ogle of the HMS Swallow had apprehended the Ranger, a critical vessel that was a part of Roberts' fleet and commandeered by one James Skirm. The HMS Swallow made light work of the Ranger, even going on to blow a bunch of holes in the vessel. James Skirm even had his own leg blown off in the encounter, and 10 of his men would die. Captain Shalona Ogle would bring the HMS Swallow up to Cape Lopez, and to his shock, he would find the Royal Fortune there. Roberts had been busy capturing a vessel known as the Neptune, and so was unaware that one of his most valued prizes had been destroyed and the crew imprisoned. To make matters worse, the pirates aboard the Royal Fortune were so drunk from celebrating the capture of the vessel that they were in no means ready for a skirmish. In fact, many of the pirates saw the approaching HMS Swallow, but they thought it was James Skirm bringing back the Ranger to shore. However, a deserter from the HMS Swallow recognised the vessel and alerted Roberts immediately of the approach. Roberts set sail with the crew aboard the Royal Fortune and aimed to escape the approaching Swallow, but the helmsman panicked and wasn't able to keep the Royal Fortune on course. Therefore, it sustained a massive blow from the Swallow, one that killed Roberts. It's said that he was killed by a grape shot which struck him in the throat as he stood barking orders on the deck. For those of you who are unsure what a grape shot is, it's a type of shot from an artillery that isn't a single element, but instead a mass of small balls packed tightly into a canvas bag. When put together, the balls look like a bunch of grapes, hence the name grape shot. When fired, the small grape-like balls would spread out horizontally and strike multiple targets. In essence, you could consider a grape shot to be like a blast from a giant shotgun. Before his body could be claimed by the attacking Captain Ogle, Roberts' body was dumped overboard, as was his request to be buried at sea. The crew wrapped him in the ship's sail, and since then, his body has never been recovered. Captain Ogle would receive a knighthood for his achievement, and would steal a handsome amount of gold dust from Roberts' cabin. All of Roberts' crew were hung, imprisoned, or sold into slavery. Only a few of them were acquitted of their crimes. It was this battle that would prove to be the downfall of pirates worldwide, and many considered the death of Bartholomew Roberts to be the end of the golden age of piracy. It's obvious to see why Bartholomew Roberts was such a charismatic pirate, and why he is remembered today. There are some interesting side notes that I'd like to mention, including Roberts' attire during battle. It's said that he would wear the finest of clothes, with expensive jewellery, and an air of nobleness about him, even during the thick of a skirmish. It should also be noted that unlike most other pirates, Roberts would not drink rum, but instead chose a more gentlemanly beverage, a spot of tea. Another more interesting theory about Roberts' life is that Roberts was actually a transvestite woman, though there is little evidence to support this. One claim is that his more trusted of the crew were aware that he was a woman, and thus they threw his body overboard upon his death to conceal the truth. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It certainly is a longer one, but I felt like it was necessary to cover Bartholomew Roberts' exciting life at sea. What did you guys think of his illustrious career? Personally, I think he's my new favourite pirate. Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Our next legend was such an ambitious Viking that he killed his own father for the throne. Until the next time.